Today we're going to talk about ITAC withdrawing their permits on rebate item 41211. So this rebate was created right at the very beginning of lockdown, and the idea behind it was that ITAC would issue permits on essential goods like personal protective equipment as well as certain drugs, and anyone importing these goods with the appropriate permit would not pay duties or VAT on these goods. Now, this was never meant to live past the 31st of May, and on the 28th of May, ITAC announced that any permit which had been issued and still had any kind of volume on it after the 31st of May, whatever excess volume had not been cleared, you would simply forfeit that volume. So this means if you clear goods on the 1st of June, let's say surgical gloves or surgical masks, you would now have to pay the full duty from the 1st of June onwards, as well as the VAT. I have no idea how many people have ordered goods which have not yet been cleared and how much unused permit is currently floating around, but I would suspect there's at least some of that, and that could be quite a heavy cost burden. Some of these items attract quite large amounts of duty. Now, it's not clear what happens to the items on the list which cannot be supplied locally, but which also attract a duty. And paracetamol here is a really good example. So Aspen used to own a plant in Cape Town called Fine Chemicals, which used to produce paracetamol. And this plant shut down somewhere towards the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013. They were never a particularly competitive producer of paracetamol. And they survived largely because they had some anti-dumping duties in place, and they also had a 10% duty. The anti-dumping duties were taken away, and they were then left with the 10% duty, which they clearly felt was not enough to warrant production. That plant was shut down, but the duties have remained in place since then. They've never been taken away. Now, those duties were rebated in the course of the 411211 rebate being in existence. And the consumption of paracetamol has certainly been increasing. So by taking that away, we're going to see a fairly significant increase in the cost of paracetamol to our downstream producers of products like Panado, which are deemed to be important drugs. I'm not entirely sure what the solution to this is. My gut feel is we should probably look at creating something a little more permanent, like a temporary rebate. That really isn't an oxymoron. A temporary rebate will remain in place for as long as we don't have production. When production comes back online, if that ever happens again, then ITAC will simply stop issuing permit and the duty will remain in place. Now, it is possible that Aspen are looking at putting up their plant again, or maybe there's someone else looking at making an investment in paracetamol. I don't know the detail of that, but it seems inconceivable to me that that is going to happen in the next few weeks or even the next few months. I don't know if Aspen have simply mothballed their plant and maybe they can put it back together and get it back online. But that would really not be an ideal solution. That was never a competitive plant. They did not produce paracetamol in the way that it is made in the most competitive factories in the world. So we're still going to end up with a relatively expensive product, but we do have a problem here. Most of our paracetamol imports moved to India, and when India put a ban on the exports of all sorts of personal protective equipment and certain drugs, South Africa was suddenly left in a position where we were struggling to get this important chemical into the market. Government have stated that they may see this pandemic as an opportunity to revitalize our trade policy, which is a slightly alarming thought, but we will have to see how that ends up playing out. In the meanwhile, I remain skeptical of ITAC's claim that we have enough of this product in the market. We really are only at the beginning of the spike in the curve, and it feels strange to me that people would have imported enough of this product in the period, which has essentially just been 2 months long, to see us through the rest of this period. And it also feels inconceivable that our domestic production has suddenly increased enough to make up those numbers. But also the idea that our domestic production can be bolstered, and that is a good idea. If that has increased, are people going to make an investment large enough to meet the requirements during the pandemic? But when those requirements drop off, we're going to be sitting with surplus capacity. This could see increased duties, larger amounts of protection being put in place, or hopefully we begin seeking export markets if the production in those factories are indeed competitive. So this brings me back again to the paracetamol example. This simply doesn't make any kind of sense if our production of paracetamol is uncompetitive. That's a product which we will then never be able to properly export anywhere else. Nevertheless, we'll have to see what happens. We don't yet have the data from SARS on how well utilized this rebate has been. That data will only be available in the course of July. So we will be analyzing that in quite a lot of detail, and we'll put out a short report and video discussing what we can do and how well this rebate has worked. I do think we will see a recurrence of rebate item 41211 again in the next few months as we climb up the curve. But for now, any stock you have which is yet uncleared, you need to be sure is cleared on time. And for the rest of it, many people will simply be faced with the duty. And perhaps just a closing comment on this. Since we started the videos talking about this rebate, we've received a huge number of companies contacting us. I'm slightly alarmed at the number of those companies who have never imported before. I'm also quite worried by the number of phone calls I've had from people adamant that they should not be charging VAT on these goods. So let me just reiterate again, no part of this rebate allowed the goods to not attract VAT when they made a sale. Nothing was ever zero rated. We should remember that when the guidelines for this rebate were published by ITAC, both ITAC and SARS said they will be auditing the people who have used these rebates to see if they've been used correctly. I do fear that a large number of people have not used the rebates correctly. I do fear that there's a VAT problem on the horizon. I have no evidence for this, but just based on those phone calls I've received, I am a little bit worried. I think in the case of paracetamol particularly, I would really like to talk to companies that use paracetamol. I think we should be making an application for a proper rebate of duty or even the full removal of duty on paracetamol. And I think this needs to be done with some measure of urgency. If you do wish to talk to us about it, please contact me on covid19@xa.co.za. And remember to subscribe, ring the bell to be kept up to date on all the new videos. Stay safe. Bye-bye.